The cafe sat on the corner of a busy city street, where glass buildings reflected the morning sun and expensive cars lined the road outside. It was the kind of place where people came not just for coffee, but to be seen. Soft music played in the background, and the smell of roasted beans filled the air. Every table was clean, every cup placed carefully, and every worker moved quickly, knowing that one small mistake could cost them their job. The waitress had been on her feet since before sunrise. She arrived early every day, tying her apron in the small staff room while reminding herself to stay calm, stay polite, and stay strong. She needed this job. Rent was due soon, groceries were running low, and there was someone at home who depended on her completely. No matter how tired she felt, she always showed up with a quiet smile. She moved from table to table, balancing trays, refilling cups, and listening to customers who barely looked at her face. Some spoke kindly. Most didn't. She was used to being invisible. Still, she did her work with care, wiping spills quickly and remembering regular orders without being asked. The manager trusted her, even if the customers rarely noticed her effort. That morning, the cafe was more crowded than usual. A business event nearby had brought in wealthy guests, all dressed in sharp suits and expensive shoes. Laughter mixed with the sound of cups clinking. The waitress felt the pressure rise as orders came faster than normal. Her hands moved quickly, but her mind stayed focused. One mistake, she told herself. Just don't make one mistake. Then the door opened, and the room changed. A man stepped inside with the kind of confidence that made people look twice. His watch shined under the lights, and his voice carried across the room even before he reached the table. People recognized him instantly. He was known in the city. Successful, rich, and often talked about online. He had built businesses, appeared in interviews, and was often praised for his bold personality. With him was another man, quieter and less flashy. He walked with calm steps, observing the room instead of demanding attention. He dressed well, but without showing off. While the first man enjoyed being noticed, the second seemed more interested in understanding the people around him. They chose a table near the center of the cafe. The manager rushed over personally, greeting them with a nervous smile. Other customers whispered. Some glanced toward the waitress. Knowing she would likely be the one serving them, she took a deep breath, adjusted her grip on the tray, and walked toward the table. Her hands were steady as she greeted them politely. She took their order, repeating it carefully to avoid mistakes. The loud man barely looked at her, scrolling on his phone while speaking. His friend nodded and thanked her softly. When she finished, as she turned away, she felt the familiar tension in her shoulders. She reminded herself it was just another table, just another order. The drinks were ready quickly. She placed them carefully on her tray. 2 coffees, 1 black and 1 with cream. She checked them twice. Everything was right. As she walked back, someone behind her bumped into her chair slightly while standing up. It wasn't hard, but it was enough to throw her balance off for a second. Time slowed. The tray tilted. Her heart jumped. She tried to steady it, but 1 cup slid forward. Hot coffee spilled, splashing onto the table and onto the expensive suit of the loud man. The cafe went silent. The waitress froze. Her breath caught in her chest as she stared at the dark stain spreading across the fabric. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the man stood up so fast, his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "What is wrong with you?" he shouted. Heads turned. Phones were lowered. Every sound in the cafe seemed to disappear except his voice. "I'm so sorry," the waitress said quickly, her voice shaking. "It was an accident. I'll clean it right away." "Sorry?" He snapped. "Do you know how much this suit costs? You people are always careless." Her face burned as she reached for napkins, her hands trembling. She apologized again, Quietly, not daring to look up, the man kept going. His words grew louder, sharper. He complained about service, about standards, about how someone like her shouldn't be working in a place like this. Each sentence cut deeper, and the last dot the manager rushed over, trying to calm him down, offering compensation and apologies. But the man waved him away, pointing at the waitress. She should be fired, he said. Right now. The waitress felt her throat tighten. She had seen anger before, but this was different. This wasn't just about the coffee. It was about power. About showing everyone who mattered and who didn't. Around them, customers stayed quiet. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked away. No one spoke up. The friend finally stood, placing a hand on the man's arm. It was an accident, he said calmly. She didn't mean. Stay out of it, the man snapped, shaking his arm free. If you want to live like this, fine. I don't. The waitress straightened slowly. Her hands stopped shaking. She took a deep breath and met the manager's eyes. I'll take responsibility, she said softly. I understand. The room felt heavy. The manager hesitated, torn between fear of losing an important customer and concern for his employee. The waitress looked down at her apron, stained now with coffee, and then back up. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She simply nodded once, as if making a decision inside herself. The man smirked, satisfied. He sat back down, adjusting his jacket, already moving on. But his friend kept watching the waitress. Something about her calm, about the way she held herself despite the humiliation, caught his attention. This wasn't the reaction he expected. There was strength there. Quiet, but real. As she walked away to the back, the cafe slowly returned to noise. Conversations resumed, cups clinked again, but something had changed. An invisible line had been crossed. The friend remained standing, his eyes following her until she disappeared through the staff door. A strange feeling settled in his chest. He didn't know why, but he felt that this moment wasn't over. Not even close. The back room of the cafe was small and quiet, a sharp contrast to the noise outside. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with extra cups, boxes of supplies, and cleaning cloths. The waitress stood near the sink, staring at her reflection in the metal surface. Her face looked calm, but her chest felt tight, like something heavy was sitting on it. She slowly untied her apron and folded it neatly, placing it on the counter. Her hands moved with care, the same way they always did. She did not rush. She did not panic. She had learned long ago that rushing only made things worse. Behind her, the manager entered the room. He cleared his throat softly. I'm really sorry, he said. You know how things are. He's an important customer. She nodded. I understand, she replied. Her voice was steady, even though her heart wasn't. I should have been more careful. The manager looked at her, surprised by her calm. He had expected tears or anger. Instead, he saw quiet acceptance. That made the situation feel heavier. Out in the cafe, the loud man complained loudly to anyone who would listen. He talked about poor service and low standards, making sure others heard him. He wanted attention. He wanted control. His friend sat across from him, silent. He watched the reflection of people in the cafe window instead of his companion. Something about the situation bothered him deeply. Not the spilled coffee, but the way the waitress had been treated. He had seen accidents before. He had seen real mistakes. This wasn't one of them. It was a moment that had been turned into a show. The friend glanced toward the back door again. He felt a pull, a curiosity he couldn't explain. Most people would have broken down. She hadn't. That calm wasn't weakness. It was something else. Minutes passed. The manager returned to the table with apologies and promises. Fresh drinks were offered. Discounts were given. The loud man accepted them with a satisfied nod, already talking about another meeting later that day, but his friend barely touched his coffee. "I'll be right back," he said quietly. Standing up, he walked toward the back of the cafe, ignoring the confused look from his companion. He knocked lightly on the staff door before opening it. Inside, the waitress was wiping down a counter she no longer needed to clean. She looked up, surprised to see him. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said gently. She shook her head. "No." There was a pause. He searched for the right words. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry for what happened. It wasn't right." She offered a small smile. "Thank you. But things like this happen." He frowned slightly. "They shouldn't." Her smile faded. "Maybe, but they do." He noticed her hands. They were steady, not shaking. That struck him again. "If you don't mind me asking," he said carefully, "why didn't you argue back?" She thought for a moment before answering. "Because some battles aren't worth fighting," she said. "And some people don't listen when they feel powerful." Her words surprised him. They didn't sound like something he expected from someone in her position. They sounded thoughtful, experienced. He nodded slowly. "Still, you didn't deserve that." She looked down. "No one does." Another pause settled between them. Outside, the cafe noise continued, but in that small room, everything felt still. "I don't think he understands what he did," the friend said. She met his eyes. "Most people don't." Something clicked in his mind. He realized he had judged her too, at first glance. Everyone had. And that realization made him uncomfortable. "Are you leaving?" he asked. "For today," she replied. "Maybe longer." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He placed it on the counter, sliding it toward her. "If you ever need help," he said, "or just someone to talk to, call me." She looked at the card but didn't touch it. "I appreciate that," she said honestly, "but I'll be fine." He smiled, a little sadly. "I believe you." As he turned to leave, he stopped. "One more thing," he said. "You handled yourself with dignity. That matters." Her eyes softened for a brief moment. "Thank you." He stepped back into the cafe. The loud man looked up. "What took you so long?" he asked. The friend sat down slowly. "I needed air," he said. They finished their drinks in silence. The loud man checked his phone, already moving on to the next thing. He did not look back toward the staff area, even once. Before leaving, the friend glanced back one last time. Through the small window of the backroom door, he saw the waitress picking up her bag. She stood tall, her shoulders straight, her head held high. As they walked out into the street, sunlight hit the glass buildings again. The loud man laughed about something on his phone. But the friend wasn't listening. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. Not just for her, but for all of them. He knew one thing for sure. This story was far from over. The afternoon sun hung low as the waitress stepped out of the cafe and onto the sidewalk. The noise of traffic rushed toward her, mixing with voices and horns, but she stood still for a moment, letting the air hit her face. She had learned to pause like this when life tried to knock her down. Just a few seconds to breathe, to remind herself she was still standing. She adjusted the strap of her worn bag on her shoulder and began to walk. Each step felt heavy, not because she was weak, but because she was carrying more than most people knew. The cafe door closed behind her, and with it, a chapter she had expected to last much longer. A few blocks away, she stopped at a small park and sat on a bench. The sounds there were softer. Birds moved between trees. Children laughed in the distance. She rested her hands in her lap and looked at the ground. Losing the job hurt, but not in the way people might think. It wasn't about pride. It was about responsibility. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside were papers she kept close, papers that reminded her why she kept going even on days like this. She didn't open them. She didn't need to. Just knowing there was enough. Back at the cafe, the friend sat in the car, staring through the windshield instead of starting the engine. The loud man was busy talking on the phone, laughing, already forgetting the incident. But the friend couldn't forget. The image of the waitress standing calm under pressure replayed in his mind. He thought about her words, about dignity, about power. Something pushed him to act. He didn't fully understand it yet, but he knew ignoring it would feel wrong. Later that evening, he made a call. Then another. Quiet calls, careful questions. He described the cafe, the situation, and the woman. He didn't expect much. But what he heard made him sit up straighter. There was more to her story. The next day, the waitress arrived early at a modest building across town. It wasn't fancy. The paint was faded, and the steps creaked under her feet. Inside, the hallway smelled like old books and strong tea. This place didn't judge her. It didn't care where she worked or what clothes she wore. She greeted the receptionist warmly and walked down the hall to a small office. Inside, she placed her bag down and opened the envelope she had carried the day before. The papers were neatly organized, forms, notes, plans, all proof of something she had been working toward quietly for years. She sat down and began reviewing them, focused and calm. Losing one job didn't erase everything she had built. Across the city, the friend stood outside the cafe again. He hadn't told his companion he was coming back. Some things were better done alone. He spoke with the manager, asking questions gently, not accusing, just listening. The manager sighed, clearly tired. She was one of our best workers, he admitted. Never late, never rude, always responsible. That only deepened the friend's curiosity. Do you know anything about her life outside this place? He asked. The manager shook his head. She never talked about herself. That answer said more than any story could. The friend left the cafe with a strange mix of anger and respect. Anger at how easily people were pushed aside. Respect for how quietly she carried herself. That evening, he searched through old contacts and records. Not because he wanted to interfere, but because he wanted to understand. And slowly, a picture began to form. A picture no one in that cafe would have guessed. The waitress, meanwhile, finished her work at the modest office and stepped outside as the sun dipped lower. She walked toward a small apartment building nearby. Inside, she removed her shoes and greeted the person waiting for her with a gentle smile. They talked softly. She listened more than she spoke. She prepared a simple meal, moving with confidence in the kitchen. This was where she felt strongest, needed. Later, when the apartment grew quiet, she sat by the window and looked out at the city lights. She allowed herself one deep sigh. Not of defeat, but of release. She thought about the man who had shouted. She didn't feel anger. She felt something closer to sadness. Not for herself, but for him. Anyone who needed to tear someone else down to feel tall was already standing on shaky ground. Across the city, the friend sat at his desk, staring at the information in front of him. He leaned back slowly, exhaling in disbelief. So that's who she is, he whispered. It explained everything. Her calm, her words, her strength. He now understood why she hadn't fought back, why she hadn't begged. She didn't need to prove herself in a moment meant to humiliate her. The next morning, news spread quietly through certain circles. Whispers, not headlines. People who knew how to listen began to talk. And slowly, the truth started moving closer to the loud man who thought the story was already over. The waitress woke up early, as always. She prepared herself for the day with the same routine. The world hadn't ended. Life moved forward. She didn't know that eyes were now watching her with respect instead of judgment. She had no idea that the choice she made in silence was about to change everything. The calm before the storm had begun. The morning air felt cooler than usual as the friend walked through the glass doors of a large building downtown. The lobby was quiet, polished, and guarded by calm professionalism. People moved with purpose, greeting each other with nods instead of loud voices. This place ran on respect and quiet power, not noise. He paused near the entrance, taking a breath. What he had learned over the past day still sat heavy in his chest. It wasn't gossip. It wasn't a rumor. It was real, documented, and undeniable. Inside a conference room upstairs, a small group waited. No one raised their voice. No one rushed. Papers were neatly stacked. Screens showed figures, plans, and timelines. When the friend entered, the room fell silent. "She's confirmed," someone said calmly. "Every detail checks out." The friend nodded. "Then it's time to do this the right way." Across the city, the waitress followed her usual routine. She woke early, prepared breakfast, and made sure everything at home was in order before stepping out. Losing the cafe job had changed her schedule, but not her discipline. She believed in structure. It helped her think clearly. She walked through familiar streets, greeted by shop owners who knew her by face, if not by story. To them, she was just another woman working hard to make life better. And that was fine with her. Later that day, she arrived at the modest building again. Inside, conversation stopped briefly as she entered. Not out of fear, but respect. She returned quiet greetings and took her seat, opening her notes. Her focus was steady, but something felt different in the air. A few people exchanged glances. No one said anything, but she noticed. Around midday, a message appeared on her phone. Short, polite, unexpected. The friend had reached out. She stared at the screen for a long moment before responding. She didn't feel nervous. She felt curious. They agreed to meet later that afternoon in a quiet public place. Somewhere simple. Somewhere honest. When the time came, she arrived first and chose a table near a window. Sunlight spilled across the surface, warming her hands as she rested them on her bag. She watched people pass outside, each carrying their own unseen story. The friend arrived a few minutes later. He greeted her with the same calm respect he had shown before. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. She nodded. "You said it was important." "It is," he replied. They sat in silence for a moment. Not awkward. Just though. "Full. I want to be clear," he said carefully. "I'm not here to apologize again. And I'm not here to offer charity." She met his eyes. "Good," she said. "I wouldn't accept either." A small smile crossed his face. "I thought so." He leaned forward slightly. "I spent some time learning about you." She didn't react. No surprise. No fear. "I know," she said quietly. That caught him off guard. "You expected it?" He asked. She nodded. People always get curious when they realize they judged too quickly. He exhaled. "Then you know why I'm here." "Yes," she said. "You want to understand what my friend didn't." He didn't deny it. "I won't speak about him," she continued. "Not because I'm afraid, but because this isn't about him." He listened closely. "What happened at the cafe was uncomfortable," she said. "But it wasn't new. I've seen worse rooms than that." He raised an eyebrow slightly. "I didn't always serve coffee," she added. There it was. Not dramatic. Not proud. Just honest. She reached into her bag and placed a single document on the table. Nothing flashy, just proof. He glanced at it, then looked back at her, stunned. "I wanted to live quietly for a while," she said. "To build something that didn't depend on titles or attention." "You could have corrected him," the friend said softly. "I could have," she replied. "But then he would have learned nothing." The friend leaned back, shaking his head slowly. "You let him believe he was right." "No," she said. "I let him reveal who he was." Those words stayed with him. They talked longer after that. About work. About responsibility. About how power changes people when no one questions it. She never spoke badly of anyone. She spoke clearly, thoughtfully, like someone used to being heard without needing to shout. When they stood to leave, the friend felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Respect without conditions. "May I ask you one thing?" he said. She nodded. "What will you do if he finds out?" She paused, then smiled gently. "Nothing," she said. "Life will do enough." That evening, the loud man attended a formal event, surrounded by familiar faces. Laughter echoed. Glasses clinked. He felt comfortable, important. Then conversation shifted. Someone asked a careful question. Another mentioned a connection. A third fell silent when he spoke. The room hadn't changed, but the way people looked at him had. Across town, the waitress closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. She felt tired, but peaceful. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't demanded respect. And yet, respect was finally finding its way to her. The truth was moving quietly now, step by step, and soon it would reach the one person who believed the story had ended at a spilled cup of coffee. The next few days passed quietly, but the silence carried weight. The loud man went about his routine as usual, attending meetings, answering calls, and making decisions with confidence. On the surface, nothing had changed. But beneath that surface, small cracks were forming. At a breakfast meeting, a familiar face avoided his eyes. During a call, a partner sounded distant, careful with words. At a social gathering, laughter paused when he joined the group. No one confronted him. No one explained anything. That made it worse. He brushed it off at first. People were busy, he told himself. Markets shifted. Moods changed. But deep down, a sense of unease followed him. One evening, he received an invitation to a private gathering. It wasn't unusual, but the tone felt different. Short, formal, no praise. He arrived dressed sharply, confidence back in place. The room was elegant and calm, filled with people he respected. As he stepped inside, conversation softened. Some nodded politely. Others simply watched. He took a seat near the front, scanning faces, trying to read the room. Then the discussion began. It wasn't about him at first. It was about values, responsibility, how people with influence shape culture, even in small moments. The words were measured, but the meaning was clear. Finally, someone spoke directly. "Power reveals character," the voice said calmly, "especially when no one thinks it matters." The loud man shifted in his seat. Examples were shared. Stories of leaders who had lost respect not through failure, but through arrogance. No names were mentioned. None were needed, and a document appeared on the screen. He recognized it instantly. The cafe. The date. The incident. His heart dropped. The room stayed quiet as eyes turned toward him. Not angry. Not accusing. Disappointed. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in a long while, he didn't know what to say. Across town, the waitress sat at a desk, focused on her work. She hadn't followed the whispers. She didn't need to. She believed in letting actions speak when the time was right. Her phone buzzed. A message from the friend. "It's happening." It read, "Just wanted you to know." She looked at the screen, then set the phone aside. She returned to her work, calm and steady. Back in the meeting room, the loud man finally spoke. "It was a mistake," he said. "I was having a bad day." The response was gentle but firm. "Bad days don't excuse behavior," someone replied. "They reveal it." Silence filled the space. He felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Not anger. Not pride. Regret. Later that night, he sat alone in his office. The city lights stretched below him, cold and distant. He replayed the moment in the cafe again and again. The spilled coffee. The raised voice. The calm woman who didn't fight back. For the first time, he wondered why. The answer unsettled him. He realized she hadn't been weak. She had been strong enough not to prove it. The next morning, he did something unexpected. He returned to the cafe. The place looked smaller than he remembered, quieter. The manager recognized him immediately. Nervous again. "I'm not here to complain," he said quickly. "I'm looking for the waitress." The manager hesitated. "She doesn't work here anymore." "I know," he said softly. "Can you tell her I came?" The manager nodded, surprised. Days passed. Then one afternoon, the loud man received a message. A simple response. "She wishes you well." Nothing more. No anger. No blame. Just distance. He read it several times, each word heavier than the last. Across the city, the waitress closed her laptop and stood by the window. Sunlight filled the room. Life felt lighter now, not because things were easy, but because they were honest. She had chosen dignity over drama. And it had changed everything. Later that week, the friend met her again, briefly. No formal setting. Just a quiet walk. "You never asked for anything," he said. She smiled. "I didn't need to. What will you do now?" He asked. She looked ahead. "Keep building," quietly. He nodded, understanding. Months passed. The loud man became quieter, more careful. Some opportunities faded. Others remained, but with new expectations. He learned slowly that respect isn't demanded. It's earned. And sometimes lost in a single moment. The waitress moved forward with her plans. No spotlight, no applause, just progress. People who worked with her spoke of her calm leadership, her fairness, her ability to listen. She never mentioned the CAFE acute. She didn't have to. The lesson had already been written, not in headlines. But in the way lives shifted. Afterward, all because of a spilled cup of coffee. And the choice one person made to walk away with dignity instead of shouting back.